Good evening. For those of you who don't know, I am Tim Wolf, Village Manager. I've been here a little while, 2004. You might not recognize me. I was skinnier and had hair back then, so.
Join the club.
Yeah, I know, it's crazy. But if you remember from our lake committee, that had been shepherding this project, Bill Keeneland and Norm Burmeister from the LIPOA. Todd Buchanan, one of our three, community members at large that are on the committee. So what are we doing? We have an election in less than 2 weeks, August the 8th. Everyone in the village will vote at Sherman Township. So we were able to consolidate the two precincts into one because it's the only item on the ballot that night. So those of us who live in Broomfield, we're going up to Sherman to vote. You can absolutely vote absentee, and it is a bona fide election, so you do have to be a registered voter in the village of Lake Isabella to participate. So it's not like a special assessment where vacant property owners get an equal say for something of this size and magnitude. The appropriate mechanism that I believe the village and the association felt was the voters of the community decide whether or not they want to move forward with this. So here's what is on the ballot. Pretty straightforward. Shall the village levy a new millage of up to 3 mills for up to 12 years for the purpose of funding lake and river improvements, including without limitation, dredging, fishery stocking, and other work or improvements to restore and otherwise improve Lake Isabella, which is the body of water, and the Chippewa River, together with all work, services, equipment, and related costs necessary or incidental to these improvements, which is estimated to raise $281,000 in the first year. So a little bit different from what we did last fall. And there's a quote from Nelson Mandela that when we started to look at the results of last fall's election, I thought was very appropriate. You never lose, you either win or you learn. And so last year, when we had a joint bond proposal for Parks and Rec and dredging, it lost by 35 votes. And that's a pretty slim margin. And so we started to look through and see, what type of feedback did we have in that process that, if we made some changes, is something the community still wants to support? What do they really want to support? And, so, you just said you're being spied on. So we did a little postmortem and, we asked ourselves questions like, was the ask too much? Would a special assessment have been a better option? Were there differences in how the townships voted? Should they have been separated, one for just dredging, one for parks? And, we looked at people's comments on social media. So I put it on a separate ballot and you've got my vote. All they need to do is put dredging on a millage by itself. They should have separated the proposal into two. We are all for the dredging, but everything else is a hard no. So after the election, the village reached out to the association. Said, we think there's interest in the community to try a dredging only proposal. If you guys are interested in continuing to partner, we are, and we would like to at least give the community one more shot at a dredging only proposal, because that's the feedback that we've had, is that this is the proposal that you guys wanted to see was dredging and dredging only. The other difference, obviously we talked a little bit about it, is it's a millage as opposed to a bond. So last year we did a proposal for 2.75 mils, and that was a bond. That would have raised about $2.3 million roughly. 60% of that was going to go towards dredging, 40% towards recreation programs. So those are your trails, your dog park, those type of things. And that was put together by just the village and the association. When we took the feedback that we had from last fall and we looked at, what are we being told from the community? We didn't get a sense that anybody said that the ask was really too much. We didn't hear anyone say, I would have supported this at 1 mil or 1.5. It was, we didn't want the rec stuff tied to the lake. So this is 100% directed to dredging and lake and river restoration. And the other feedback that we really incorporated was we expanded the committee. So we have 3 from the village, 3 from the association, and 3 from the community at large that are out there that are part of this committee. And when we looked at whether or not to do a bond versus a millage, we kind of looked at the pros and cons and say, the bond, you're taking out a loan. So you get a voter approval to sell bonds for whatever amounts on the ballot. And that's it. Like, that's your pot of money. That's what you've got to pay back. Even if you don't use it, or even if it's not enough, you're locked into that amount of money for that period of time. Can't be adjusted downwards because you take that loan out, you gotta pay it back and you gotta pay the interest that you're paying. And it's also more restrictive due to, with us, we're a tax exempt organization. So there are some more cumbersome IRS regulations that come into how we do reporting with bonding and those type of commitments that eat up more of those fees or more of that revenue you get from a millage. So from a millage, it's continual, it's ongoing. Doesn't require debt, even in folks. The millage rate is actually the cap, so you don't have to levy the full 3 mils, you can levy a lower amount. And it gives you the most amount of flexibility in how you can use the money during the project. That committee, 2 of the LIPOA members are here. John Doffenbach was the third. On our side, our village president, Dave Torgerson, our pro temp, Bob Litterway, and Brett Peavy. Our clerk was the alternate. And our other 2 community members at large other than Todd were Pete D'Ambrosio and Tracy Nelson. But when you look at why we need to make the ask to do this and why it doesn't come out of the regular revenue stream that we have as the village and as the association. Speaking only on the village side of the table, we have a very healthy, robust tax base in the community. We just don't levy much of a millage. So these are your property taxes as a whole. You take out the 18 mil school one that if you're homestead, you don't pay. And property owners in the village of Lake Isabella pay about $2.78 million in property taxes across the board. So that's the county, your Chippewa Hills debt millages, the township operating, IRIDE, county parks. Everybody in the village, whether you're paying it to Sherman Township or you pay it to the village, who then pays it to Sherman Township for a Broomfield voter, pays 1 mil for fire assessment. Everybody pays 1/3 of a mil starting this year for dedicated road patrols from the sheriff's department. And then you have the village operating, which this year comes in at 0.818 mil. So when all is put together, 92.3% of your property tax dollars are going outside of the village. So our property tax revenue collection is about $82,000 this year, which is 3% of your property taxes that you're gonna pay. The association, roughly 1,000 members, give or take. You know, both organizations are funded at a level where we can, I think, relatively comfortably maintain our status quo operations. We don't have the ability to do anything outside of what we normally do. You know, and you look at, you know, with us, we have a cap in our village charter that says we can't levy more than 1. We have a heavily rollback that rolls it back to that 0.8 this year. So, you know, it's not like we can go and just arbitrarily raise the tax rate without a vote of the people. We're boxed in on that. So what does 3 mils actually look like? Well, it's $3 for every $1,000 of taxable value that you have. So if you have a $40,000 taxable piece of property, you're paying $10 a month, $120 a year. $75,000 taxable value, $225. So about $18, $19 a month. And roughly 82% of the parcels in the village have a taxable value of $75,000 or less.
So you should mention that your taxable value is about half of what your market value
Correct.
is.
So, you know, and that's probably lagged a few years at this point in time, the way the market's taken off the last few years. So I would say your taxable value is probably about 40% of what your house.
I'm not gonna uncap it.
Don't go get reassessed.
Yeah, don't go get reassessed. A lot of bad comps right now.
But you're in theory,
Yeah,
if it's that $150,000 taxable value is a $300,000 home.
you know, in the longer,
$300,000 home.
Yeah. and the longer you've held on to that property, the more that gap's gonna be. With proposal land heavily, your equalized value isn't capped in how much that can swing, but your taxable is capped at, I think, 5% a year. That was one of the things that we saw back in the 2008 economic crash, is that there was such a bubble between people's taxable and their equalized, that even as the equalized started to come down, the taxable still hadn't reached that because of how it had been capped year after year after year after year. The only way to get started is quit talking and begin doing. So this work actually began in 2021, June of 21. The village and the association began to seriously talk about a joint dredging type project, right, proposal. We were already pretty far down the road at that point in time with planning to do a proposal for Parks and Rec, and thought we could tie dredging into it as well. The feedback that we received afterwards said no, but so the plan that we had originally come up with a couple of years ago, and was part of last year's proposal, was really pretty limited. We're gonna go after the river area and the main bays, and if we had enough funding left over, we could probably start working that southeast corner. So this was the plan last year. The plan this year is on the map there, it's on the brochure, it's on our website. Much more expansive, because that was the other feedback that we got is, we don't want to support something that's only gonna halfway do the job. If we're gonna do this, we need to do it and do it right. And then we can have a lower expense long-term, because we can just maintain the lake as opposed to doing a massive restoration project like this. So, excuse me. Your brochure is on the table. They have this map. You're gonna get that same brochure in the mail next week. You're getting the FAQ one that's up there if you grab it. Probably the next day or two in the mail. All of that's available on our website. But as you can see from up there on the screen and in the pamphlet in front of you, a much larger project, and much more expansive, hitting a lot of different areas around the lake. And really, these 4 areas can be grouped into 4 different type of areas, where you've got the river. The river unquestionably is, top of the list. It has to get done, because if we don't correct the river, there's no point to do the rest of the lake, because you're not gonna stop the
Water
problem
flows downhill.
And you can see from this aerial that that's some pretty nutrient rich sediment there on the river bottom. So this is Riviera Park off of Carmen Drive. There is a boat launch right here. Doesn't get used. And all this used to be dock spaces, which can't be used. One of the things that has hurt the river in this area is that this island didn't used to be an island. It was part of this parcel here. In the 1970s, the property owner cut themselves a nice channel right through there. So now as the river comes down off of Rowland Road through the bridge, it comes right here, and instead of following the natural course that it should normally do, it just follows the path of least resistance and shoots straight down that western edge of the island, causing the sediment buildup that you see there, because it never gets flushed out. There's no flowing water once you do a drawdown. The next area that's a big priority is that southeast corner. So if you go back and look at the original depth maps of the lake that we have from the 1970s, this corner of the lake had a depth of between 5 and 6 feet. That's at about a 3-foot drawdown. And the one thing you'll also notice too is that the color of that sediment is different. So what we're seeing from the drawdown and the aerials that we've been able to take is that all those heavier organic materials are getting deposited upstream of the river. And as the river comes down and meanders around, the finer materials start to fall out towards the end here. And you can see that on the map too, where so much of the project is, south of the abandoned bridge under the lake, going back up, because that's where we're seeing that sediment come in and stay. There's that boat launch that is not usable at Riviera Park. You'll notice that a second island is beginning to form near the river channel. So the actual island that's up here, and you've got this right here, because as that river comes through, it's leaving the high there. Realistically, if we don't get after that, you're gonna have a second island probably in the next 5 years, I think would be realistic, just based on the photos that we've taken over the last 10 years during drawdown. That has continually built up and up and up and up. And then last are the bays. this is at Birch Park. The boat launch is all the way over on the right over there. And this is at about a 5-foot drawdown. And you can see the bottom of the bay is nice and green. Exactly what you don't want on a lake bottom. It's great if you're playing golf, but really crappy if you're trying to use the lake. So restoring those areas, in addition to this other area here, the inflows. So in addition to the river, we do have 2 creeks that flow into the lake. This is at Indian Creek off of Rollin Road. This is actually from 2012. But you can see that when we do drawdown, the water actually starts to flow in these channels now, because during the summer, they're stagnant, they don't flow. And all of a sudden you have all that accumulated stuff that's built up, start to have water start to move and push it downstream. And that stuff ends up in the lake. So Indian Creek is right here off of Rollin. Chippewa Creek is right here. That was renamed by the US government last year to Chippewa Creek from its former name. But that is the short and skinny of it. It's a lot simpler presentations than last year because we're not talking about Parks and Rec. We're not talking trails, we're not talking dog park, we're not talking splash pad. We're just talking dredging, just talking lake and river restoration. The committee has met throughout the first half of the year. All of those meeting minutes are online, the packets are online. Most of those meetings were recorded as well, so you can go back and watch them if you want. Right on our website on the meeting minutes page. With that, we've got 3 committee members here, myself. We'd love to answer any questions you have. Mr. Haas is a second time attendee, I believe. Anything you want to start with?
No, I just
No,
came for the fellowship.
I said, we don't have cookies this year.
We didn't have one?
We have cookies tonight, so.
Wait a minute, I didn't get from you last time either.
I guess I could say, I think it's a good job to focus the way that you have at this point, and the speaking or the talking that I do around is that it's expanded.
Yes,
And you're never gonna get everybody because you still got all the holdouts that, but it helps more people than the last one, let's say, and it's clearer.
Okay, on the map, you've addressed the areas in the red. What about the orange and the yellow?
so if you go back to the first newsletter that we sent out, it talks about what the targeted areas are on page, the highest precedent. So that's what those are, those highest precedent spots from that one. And then the orange ones are the next, and then the yellow are the additional areas identified to address.
Even though we've classified those as, the higher precedent, there's no guarantee they can go first.
Yeah.
Because as Tim's first slide came up and said you're gonna collect 281,000. Those are some of the biggest areas. And if we collect money for a year and don't do anything, the second year we have to give up. Potentially, if we were to collect 281, we have to do a bunch of soil testing, send them off to get tested. That's gonna chew up a bunch of money, so there may be a small chunk of money left that we could pick a small project somewhere and show the committee, or show the community that we're using your funds as we collected it. So the next year, you might have some money left there, and then the new revenue comes in, then you can start one of the bigger priority areas.
Okay, so
And
that doesn't mean that like the yellows are down
No.
at the end of the 12-year.
No.
Necessarily.
And honestly, this map, there's no guarantee we can do everything we have on there, because we haven't got them all tested. So there's a new test now, they want the test they had before, now they want the bottom of the whole test. So Eagle could come back and say, Bonita Bay can't be done, it's got too more, or if it does get done, it's got heavy metals, mercury or something in it. And the cost per cubic yard for that area might be triple what it was for the other ones.
this morning, George shared that he estimates there's 140 locations that are gonna need to be tested.
Yeah.
And it's a 2 test, so you do a column test and a bottom test. We've talked about we're certainly not gonna go out and do all of those in year one, because that's gonna eat up all your money, or a good chunk of it in testing that you don't need to. You know, so we would, if approved in August, we would go out and start testing areas immediately so we could get moving on permitting. We've been in contact with Eagle throughout the process. You know, so it's not like this is something they're not aware of. And, you know, this is something also that the committee talked a lot about too, is that, you know, should we stay with a smaller project like we tried last time? Or should we really try and fix the problem? And one of the factors that went into that decision on the committee's end is none of us see a regulatory environment that's going to become easier and simpler the longer we wait to do this. And, you know, all of the metrics you have to pass at the state's end are based on, you know, parts per million or parts per trillion of a contaminant in a soil. You know, and those are arbitrary to a certain degree. The state could change those in 5 years. So you could go out and, you know, test arsenic and be fine at 11 parts per million because the standard's 15. Well, no, we're gonna drop it to 10 now. You know, so the quicker we can get in and get this done, the better we feel our chances of actually getting everything done. Because if we wait much longer, you know, I think the regulatory environment is going to be certainly more challenging.
The tests themselves are good for, I think it was 7 years, 10 years.
Yep.
So if we get an area tested and it comes back approved, as long as we do that in 10 years, we should be okay. As long as we test. Like I said, it could be harder to get that approval.
Are there any areas that you expect significant contamination?
No.
Okay.
So the preliminary testing that has been done so far has been done in the river along Riviera Park. And so that's this area up here. The LFUA did 7 up there. I think they did another 10 over here, 12, something like that.
Yeah, and then the picture that Tim showed, there was that lighter colored sand. Sand is a lot easier to get approved. So there's, you know, if that ends up being sand, the cost will drop from our vendors and then the approval process gets easier. So, and I don't believe, he had one test that had slightly elevated arsenic in it.
Slightly elevated arsenic. And arsenic is a naturally occurring, you know,
Right.
you know, if you do 15 and you got one that's just a hair above, that's not something to be worried about. If you got 15 and 13 of them are above,
You got
you know. And we saw arsenic actually when we did the building use restriction work over in Air Park. You know, you can get arsenic samples if there were apple trees in the area when you used to treat pesticides with, so. It's there, but there's no, you know, PFAS, there's no, you know, toxic waste in the way.
chemicals.
Yeah,
I might add that the testing that is required has went from like 2 tests per, it's about double for just a year ago.
10,000 yards.
Yeah.
The number has gone up, and of course, the cost to do that testing has all gone up. And then those tested, Eagle is one that controls all that. And they about doubled the number of tests you had to take, plus they also want the bottom now, so. Well, you know, maybe in 2 years, they'll go back the way they were, and maybe they'll double again.
They're not going back.
My guess would be that they'll go back again.
I think what we been talking about for quite a while is the river area. And I noticed looking at this, that that's not where the majority of the stuff's coming out of.
nope,
And that to me, if you keep that open, it's gonna do better in the lake. I mean, you're talking at one place 120.
Yeah.
The other place is 6. I mean, to me, it should be a lot more taken out in Riviera area if you're gonna take it out.
Some of the area at Riviera, if you look at the actual ownership of the water, the way the property line is out of our jurisdiction.
Right.
yeah, so that west side of the island.
River.
Yeah,
Shot the other side.
we can only dredge our portion with our money. So I don't know, we had an overlay at one point that showed that, but obviously most of the island is
not
his property.
Yeah, so that west channel, you know, he's on his own there. You know, you have 2 parks here too, so you got Riviera that we've talked about before. So you've got all this area that you can get right out of the Riviera, And then you have Playa Park right up here. Comes in right here.
If it's on your river, you could rock it out there. It's kind of, yeah, it is, but just make sure you got the line right.
I think it deeper than what he is.
What is the depth, targeted depth?
Yeah, so it varies by location, but the goal is to restore to the original bottom. So whether it's 2 feet, there's areas here that are probably 3 feet. Down in here, of muck that has to get taken out, less up here. Cause it's not really accumulating much up there, it's more the fact that you don't have water that goes through it at all.
The other part is your natural bottom has that slope, so it could start out at 1 inch of accumulation. And the farther down that slope you go, it grows, so you have to find.
Yeah.
The average, maybe it's 4 feet there, but 1 inch here, so you have to find, the average.
Well, I used to put docks in up there, near up your crotch and muck.
Well, I know, at the tip of the island, it's yay deep. Cause Deer Day in 2012 or whatever it was.
I guess,
Chip Hills was closed and a 12-year-old was going treasure hunting and got caught and we had to get the fire department to get him out because it was this deep.
I guess the other thing I'd like to know is, how come everybody, it'd be a lot less if everybody was involved in paying for this instead of just, I'm talking people that own lots and everything.
Everybody,
So they're paying.
Yeah, but the percentages, what I'm saying is, I mean, you're talking, I don't see, I'm reading this and it says, an owner on a vacant property can vote. Unfortunately, the individual residents vote at the village may vote in the election.
So if they're not a registered voter, they can't vote. Right.
Well, that's what I'm saying,
Yeah.
Steve. Yet the thing I'm saying is, they're here at the lake on the weekends and stuff, they have a residence someplace else. And I'm saying, anybody that owns a piece of property here should be able to have a vote, should be able to pay.
They're gonna pay.
They're gonna pay.
They're just not gonna have a vote.
If they don't, they're not registered to vote here.
You gotta be, you can only vote where you're
Yeah,
registered.
Say they're paying $200 now and they're gonna pay like 20 bucks.
I got one question for you.
Yes, sir.
How many members of houses are on the lake here?
So the village has just over 1,000 housing units.
Okay. Now.
1,012.
I heard,
three on my
that's
desk.
why I came, I wanna find out if it's true or not.
Yeah.
So, different houses, you got a small house, you're gonna pay less.
Yeah, it's entirely connected to your taxable value.
Okay, now, the people on the river.
Hmm.
If you're gonna start dragging the river first. They're gonna get mostly, or they use more of that river, right? If we back here,
Mhm.
we're not gonna use it at all, because if you don't go that way,
But it's gonna help the overall health of the whole body of the lake.
I understand that.
Fixing the river will,
I understand that,
Body to
but
make
what I
it
can't, what I can't understand is, why do they wanna have one price for all the houses? Taxes, like, if you have $1 million house, how much money are you gonna pay in taxes? Or if you got,
500,000
yeah,
taxable value.
If you-
And
now if you have 150,000, your home is worth 150,000, you're gonna pay the same thing as you?
Well, it's tied to your taxable value.
Huh?
Everybody pays the same percentage of the value of the
Yeah.
property,
Right, this chart keeps going.
Yeah.
just like you.
So-
Yeah, but-
So for my taxable value is $50,000 on my house roughly, I'm gonna pay $150 a year. You know,
so somebody on lakefront that has $150,000 taxable value is gonna pay $450.
yeah,
More.
it's still
So
3%.
so lakefront people are gonna bear the burden of the costs overall, but there's a lot more non-lakefront people. The non-lakefront people are paying actually more than the group of lakefront people. If you do the math and figure it all out,
Yeah, but,
as a group,
it is true,
that is true.
yeah, I understand that, but,
Because there's more of them.
There's more of them than that, and then lots, think about the empty lots too that are on the lakefront. It's just quantity, basically.
so what happens if, those people don't pay?
They have no
You know,
choice.
Go get their property
It's on your
taxes.
property taxes.
One on the tax.
It's on your taxes. So it's like any other property tax, you don't pay it sooner or later, Steve Pickens gonna show up with a red notice on your property.
Yeah, and then it'll be auctioned.
It'll be auctioned.
You'll have a chance to buy it back.
Yeah. Pay the taxes, yeah. That's, And you know, we saw that when we did the roads in 07. There were people, because we did that through special assessment. You know, they had a vacant piece of property that said, you know, I just don't want to pay an extra $100 a year. I'll just let Steve Pickens come and foreclose on my property and, you know, so be it. You know, they had inherited it and they were never coming up and never mowed it, didn't care. They weren't paying association dues, you know. Yeah, I mean, this is going to go on, if approved, the village summer tax bill, the one that just came out, the green bill. That's where it would be next year. Yeah. Yes, something?
Nope, I'm good.
Okay.
Actually, the people that
If
don't
you have
live
a
here.
taxable value of $200, you're looking at $550.
If you have a taxable value of 200,000, you're looking at $600.
Taxable value, not what your house is.
Right.
Or that you
Yeah.
sell it. Some people are more confused, well, my house could sell for 500,000, well, that's not your taxable value.
Yeah.
Right, it's, taxable value is like half, almost.
Yeah, like my house right now is 5275, my taxable value is 90,000.
But like,
So I pay $261, something like that a year,
like over here.
up to 12 years.
Yeah.
If we go all 12 years.
So the highest you got here is 150, and there's a lot of people here that are already there.
Right.
Yeah, that,
Okay, it says up to 3 mils.
Correct.
What's the possibility of it not being 3 mils?
I think the further you go out, the better.
Yeah.
And that's,
So then you,
you could, what you
You
want,
retire the whole bond.
you could retire the whole, everything early. too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So if the project gets completed
right,
and there's.
yeah.
And it's cheaper than we.
It comes out
and
cheaper than
it's
solid. You can either,
the only problem that I see with this
Hmm.
is the non-registered voters who are property owners.
Yeah.
There is no representation.
that happens with
That's
everything.
That's one way or another.
Every city, every township has that same
If
thing.
you do it through the association, there's another group that's not represented. If you do it through the village, there's another group. And then if you do it the way we're doing it now, there's another group
Yeah,
that's
and
not
there,
represented.
there's, you know, we looked at it hard last year, whether to do a special assessment or not, you know, and
And the thing is, this is for the betterment of the lake.
For the properties around the lake too.
And,
yeah,
Even if you don't live on the lake, your property value will be higher.
right, exactly.
100%.
And if it's not done, it's only gonna get worse.
Or you're gonna run to a point where you can't do it because it becomes too astronomically expensive
Right.
to try and do it. You know, and like the up to 3 mils, is another important thing, we talked about the regulatory environment. You know, if we're 6 years in and all of a sudden we have a new strong environmental movement in the state that clamps down on whatever, or classifies the monarch butterflies and endangered species, and you find that, you know, with a bond, you're still gotta collect the money and pay it back. With the millage, you can say, you know, we just can't do anymore, we're not gonna levy it.
When dredging begins, has there been any discussions about fish kill?
Yeah, so fish restocking is one of the things that we put as.
That was what Tim pointed out, that
Out language.
without limitations is we would have to restock. Cause we're gonna have to keep the lake down and dredge as much as you can. Inevitably, you're gonna hurt the fish population. That's why we have the money so that it's in the lake, that we can use it to restock.
Yeah, so,
And we're, you know, this is an ambitious project because we were able to do it during drawdown. The only area that we've talked about doing when the water level is up is potentially hydraulically dredging the river. But the rest of it, we're looking to do during drawdown, mainly for cost saving purposes. You know, you can bring in conventional earth moving equipment and work in November, December, January, as opposed to, hey, we gotta shut the lake down in August, you know?
Where are they gonna put this stuff?
So one of the target locations that we have right now that we are proposing, and we've talked to the state about, is our sewer lagoon property at the end of Baseline Road. So back in the 1970s, our forefathers thought they were gonna build a sewer in Lake Isabella. And so they started building out lagoons at the end of Baseline Road. We own an 80-acre parcel there. And so we have two fully formed 4.5 acres by about 8 feet deep. We got a third one that's been started. Used to be a lot deeper. Used to be a little bit deeper. In case you haven't gotten the news, we're not building a sewer here. We have no environmental risk to build a sewer here. We're not under a state mandate to do a sewer. We actually just had the state allow us to do more well and septic. So for us, if, you know, there's the opportunity to obviously keep some in the parks if you want to do some mounding, you know, reshaping, some of that. You know, low areas. You know, our DPW property here at the end of Birdie, that's 10 acres in the back, and we could definitely use it as a transfer site to get it there and then truck it to baseline as it dries, that kind of stuff. So yeah, we've got that ability to do that. A lot of it's contingent on trucking.
You go on an extended, like you say, you always go on like a 10-year plan.
Mhm.
Well, I actually visualize there will be sewer at this lake within 10 years. It's because it's moving this way already from Beal City, Littlefield,
Yeah,
Cold Water.
ours,
Now they just had a big meeting for Lake of the Hills too, so
ours would have been our own system, that's not
Yeah.
what.
I agree with you.
Not what Beal has, and they're being shifted.
But them are being filled up, just like you said, because of the brush and the woods and everything like that.
The issues between those communities are drastically different. Wademan, Jeff, is the Sherman Township trustee. Part of their problem is the size of the lot there from the 20s and 30s. They're not big enough to do an on-site system, where everything here's been platted since the mid-60s, late 60s, actually. So, you know, we have the size to do this. We went over the last decade and had the state allow us to do more well and septic north, south, Gulf Estates to Air Park, Canterbury, with an amendment just this last year. And one of the things that the state had tried to do for years, DEQ, was have a statewide sanitation code. The legislature would never sign off on it. So what we did in the final straw to get the south end lifted is we went to them and said, why don't we create a localized sanitation code with your dream code that you have for the state that you can't get adopted? We'll make that the code for those two flats. And that's what they did. They said, that's a great idea. And that's allowed all of the building you see on the south end of the lake for the last 2-3 years. We went back to them this last year, actually 2 years ago, the way they work. In north, the restrictions we got lifted there, we had a lot swapping plan. So the village owns a bunch of vacant property up in north. The proposal that we had from 13 that they agreed to was, we'll trade 2 of our lots for 1 junk lot if they can't get a well and septic permit, because that'll give you enough space to do a reserve field or a mounted system or whatever. Nobody ever had to use it. We went back and said, hey, why don't we scrap that? We can return all these to the tax roll. And that thing in the south has worked fantastic. Let's just make that the rules for north. Like, hey, that's a great idea. We'll talk to you in October. We'll talk to you in June.
The fact that every time your house sells now, you have to have a
Time of
septic
transfer.
inspection.
Yeah,
So you can't just have a big system going on forever. Every time you sell your home.
Yeah.
They look at it and say, you got a problem, you can't sell this home until this is fixed. So that kind of continually upgrades the older systems.
and we eco light test the lake all summer. We don't have any, you know, contaminants other than geese occasionally.
Definitely geese perk.
The geese. You know, so with the health department, we test at the Rowland Road Bridge up here. And that's always the high point, because everything ag coming in through there. We test at South Park, we test at Essex, we test at Tremino, and then the tribe test down at School Road. So we get this nice snapshot of the water as it moves through the water system here. And other than the bridge at School Road, never an issue unless it's geese. Rollin Road, I'm sorry, yeah, Rollin.
So the ones in the red are a definite.
Those
I mean,
are
if
the,
it's
those are the
voted in-
high priority areas,
If it's voted in, that'd be the 3 of these that are definitely gonna get done. Be the first place.
It's all contingent on permitting too.
All permitted on the permitting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Eagle comes back and says you've got something wrong with that.
We don't have permits we have a permit
Take
for
some-
Riviera Park, because I think the only place we have a permit
But that permit is
at
not
this
valid.
time.
That permit's not valid anymore, because you need the bottom sample to go with it.
You know, on some of these areas too, that have been dredged in the past, the permitting is gonna be easier because it's considered a maintenance project.
Yeah.
You know, so the places that got done in the 90s,
Which is the
as
river.
long as the association's got a copy of that permit, the state's gonna look at that differently than an area that's not been touched.
The Riviera is the one of the ones, right?
Yes.
That's been dredged.
And we-
before, so it should be easier to get our permits.
And we've tried to get creative with the state too, and have gotten shot down. So this is that southeast corner. In one of the initial proposals that we went to them and said, hey, as opposed to hauling all of that out of there, could we maybe make an island, or could we take the peninsula by South Park and make it bigger, you know, do something there, so we're not paying to truck it, we're just paying to move it and clean it out. And they said no. And the reason they said no is, what's referred to as the public use doctrine, where surface waters is a public resource of the state of Michigan. So if you reduce the surface area by making an island or a bigger peninsula, you've had a negative impact.
Make it that part of the surface.
Yeah, exactly. You've had a negative impact on the public use of that state-owned resource.
What's that?
Yeah. Yeah, Joe.
So how deep, when you say this, the amount of stuff coming out, how deep is that gonna make it then?
So back to the original river bottom or lake bottom and river bottom is where we're going, the goal with these areas.
So
So
that digging any deeper than taking out the silt and the stuff that's built up from the original bottom, that is changed.
But for
The
instance,
original
like,
bottom's not gonna get done.
what about this, for instance, that right there then?
yeah, so this, you're taking another
half, 2
that-
feet.
That's
One and a half, 2 feet.
shallower than it used to be.
That stuff that's built up over the years with the river pulling it all in,
Yeah.
taking that out down to what was the original lake bottom is what we're talking about doing. They're not gonna dig the lake bottom, that's about any deeper than what.
And that's what I'm saying, how
What's the
deep, what
original?
was the original? That's what I'm
It
saying.
was
I had
5,
read
it was
years-
5 feet, he said that's a 3 feet.
so this area right here is about 5 to 6.
Yeah.
Right here is a little bit of 7 over here, actually, to get back in the south part, but.
So there's 2 foot of fill there right
Yeah.
now.
Originally, when they built the lake back in the late sixties, seventies, the idea was to do 25 foot all the way around. The lack of
It's
the
all
get things
shut.
done, and then you're looking at
It
around
was in the
12 to
Yankee
13
permit.
as an average over the whole lake.
Yeah,
So,
it's only like 3 spots.
Even if we, without doing any digging at the most, you're gonna get 12 feet on average. You know, obviously up by the dam is deeper, it's not as deep as it is in the river and that kind of stuff, yeah, but. My feeling is that when we get River Area Park and stuff like that opened up, that river's gonna start flowing faster. And I hope it's gonna help keep the river cleaned out, obviously it's gonna continue to bring silt and stuff downstream.
Well, it took a
Which
number
will
of years.
build up
to
the
get
areas
that
you're showing, and that's why we wanna concentrate on getting those cleaned out too.
And remember the buildup is from a long time ago.
Yeah.
Been going on for,
30 years.
50 years.
That's why, to me, in my mind, I look at this project as let's get it started, we'll see the good result from it, hopefully. But after that, this isn't gonna end in 12 years, as far as I'm concerned, this needs to be an ongoing thing for decades to come if we wanna keep our lake.
Yeah.
Nice.
So that was one of the other topics we talked about at our meetings, and let's say we started at Riviera. And then maybe in year 7. That has silted in again from inflows from the river,
Mhm.
that permit is still valid, we could go back and hit that again before that permit expires, without having to go back to the state. So that would, you know, if we get the magic wand and everything gets done. And we still have a bond or millage left. We can go back and touch up areas if we keep the bond going for the millage going for.
So that
the entire
It'd be interesting
Yeah.
to see how fast it does go.
Yeah,
because then you can
study it.
Yeah,
River Arrow was, last time that was dredged was 98. Going up in the field, we'll be doing that.
Been 25 years.
25 years ago. Great,
Yeah.
we're spending $7,500. Hopefully that'll come down.
Last week.
Also, this is fresh.
So this White Street out in front of the Riviera Park, you said that island's getting, is that gonna, you're gonna be able to remove that part of that island then you were saying? Or no? That
no.
one that's being created, you know?
Oh, the south, yeah, yes, we'd be able to get in and get to this right here.
Yeah. But not that little bit of a, to go right there,
Yeah.
right there, you're not gonna, no, right where that white is, right
Oh,
straight
yeah.
there.
Be close.
Be close. Yeah, but again, this is the original river channel here, and when Eagle found that out, they were very interested in getting that restored, because thankfully, we had aerial photographs that we were able to access through Michigan State to say, hey, here's how this looked back in 1968, there wasn't anything on that side of the river there, folks.
Maybe you need to get the beaver and build a dam up there.
That's right.
I was just hoping maybe some of the silt is gonna work its way over or something
And we were,
and block out that part you dug.
well, that property used to be owned by Jack Lynch.
Right.
Lawyer from Mount Pleasant. And Jack and I, had worked out a gentleman's agreement over the summer, right before he died, didn't realize he was gonna die, that the next year, we were gonna, coffer dam or boulder off his side, just so one year we could flush it down, and he died. But yeah, we've been trying to look at creative ways to deal with this
I still think the state should be able to step in and
Maybe
say,
if you-
"Look, this is not without a permit, we're gonna wreck it."
Yeah,
Make our site deeper, it'll naturally flow.
yeah.
And then they take a couple extra scoops out of it.
Stop. Somehow stop that clearly.
Unless you guys pay enough.
Especially like in the spring, sometimes it's a big flow. And the river start taking some stuff out of there, so.
Bring beavers.
I saw a video of a family that had rescued a beaver and lives as a house pet. But he goes around and takes all the pillows and toys from the kids and stuff and builds like dams in the hallway. Here's this beaver just walking down the hall with a pillow, you know, and it's
Nature
about.
does what nature does.
That's right, on the float. Mhm. Any other questions?
Maybe what the first year, say that everything passes, the bond, or the vote passes. Will we be collecting, we won't collect that money until the following.
You won't collect till 24, but we're gonna start work. This
No, I
week.
understand
Yeah.
that, but you're saying the bulk of the money's not gonna come in until September billing for taxes.
Yeah, July billing, so, yeah. Yeah, so we will definitely get started this fall, at least with the testing and permitting. And hopefully be able to start something this winter, if not the spring at the latest, and then next fall would be when we'd have a significant amount of money to really go after something big. But you know, and I said this last fall, and I'm gonna say it again, more than anything, the most encouraging thing that I think our community has gotten out of this process, whether you vote to approve it or not, is the village and the association work together better now than we ever have. And, you know, we have a good relationship, we trust each other, we work well together. You know, we share resources, and yeah, I think regardless of how you decide to vote on this, at the end of the day, something positive has come out, even if it does fail. And, you know. Been around a lot of years here, and it's not always been the case.
Take what you can get.
Yeah. You know, the cynic in me also says this, that, you know, we've got a lot of people that, like Todd and Pete and Tracy, who are on the committee. We had another 16 that got turned away just because we didn't have space for them. You know, Lake Isabella is a unique community. You've got a village that has a 7-member council, a 7-member planning commission, a 5-member ZBA. You got an association that's got a 9-member board, you know, park committee, lake committee. That's a lot of volunteer lift out of a community of 2,000 people. You know, we need more involvement. I thank Todd, you know, for stepping up, because he's not been in either organization to any extent in the past, and, you know, we need more of that. And none of us are getting younger. That, what's that, at 7:50?
Almost like you timed it out.